All right, it's cover crop time. Well, I would have liked to have started getting some of these warm season cover crops in the ground a little sooner, but the weather doesn't always cooperate, and better late than never. So today we're going to start getting some more cover crops in the ground. We showed you on a previous video we planted a little cover crop of sunflowers, and I'm not done with that plot. I got something neat coming up on a future video. Today we're going to be focusing on this plot behind me, the one you just saw me cultivate. So this 30 by 35 plot here in the Dream Garden is where we had our Avalon sweet corn, our first planting of sweet corn this spring. It's been about a month at least since we harvested all that corn. We mowed down the stalks as best we could. My mower doesn't always just shred them up as good as I like, so you know, some of that debris is over there. But we got the mower in here, mowed the stalks down, got our drip tape ripped up, and had to rake it out a little bit before we could cultivate it. Like I showed you here, some of them stalks didn't get chopped up very well, and if you get in there with a tiller with all that in the soil, it just starts to wrap around those tines and makes a mess. So we got it cleaned out a little bit and got it cultivated, so we're going to have some loose soil for some good seed to soil contact with our cover crops. So not in all parts of the country, but definitely in the south here, this time of year, if you ride around, you know, the rural roads here in the south, you'll start to see some gardens. They're getting a little out of control. People have let them go. It's getting hot. People don't want to get out and spend as much time in the garden. Weeds are growing real fast because it's hot. They're getting tired of picking stuff, and some stuff isn't doing as well because of the humidity, and they just kind of let the gardens grow and kind of let it grow up, and then next thing you know, they just got a big mess. Don't let that happen to you, folks. There is a solution. If you're just tired of dealing with that spring garden, if you're done with it, get those plants out of there, pull it up, put something in there that's going to hold that soil, be a placeholder, keep those weeds from thriving, and just make your soil so much better for the next time you go to plant it. And that leads me into a discussion of why we cover crop. Now, there are tons and tons of benefits to cover cropping, whether it be warm season cover cropping like we're doing now, or cool season cover cropping like we'll do in the fall through the winter. Lots of benefits: erosion control, adding nitrogen to the soils, adding organic matter, pest and disease suppression, nematode suppression specifically, and that's just to name a few. So many benefits to doing a cover crop in your garden when you're not growing vegetables there. Now, the benefits of cover cropping are going to be different depending on your garden situation, where you live, your climate, lots of different factors there. For us, there are probably, you know, three really key reasons why we should be cover cropping. Now, we don't have a huge issue with erosion here. Our land is pretty flat, it's not hilly, so even if we get a hard rain, we're not losing a lot of soil. So erosion is not necessarily a big one for us, but it may be if you live in a hilly area. But there's three primary reasons why we definitely have to cover crop to keep our gardens in good shape and nice and healthy. The first one of those is weed suppression. Down here where it's hot, man, the weeds can just thrive in the summertime. Pigweed, crabgrass, you name it. And so we have to have something on that soil to keep those weeds under control. And cover cropping is a great, easy way to do that. You know, we can cultivate and keep weeds under control, but by cover cropping, it makes it a lot more manageable if we're not going to grow anything there. The second big reason we need to be cover cropping is for pest and disease control. Now, down here it's warm enough we can grow vegetable crops year round if we want to. But if we do that, that means we're constantly feeding those pests and diseases, and they are constantly reproducing, and those cycles just, you know, keep multiplying, and the problem is going to get worse year after year, even with good crop rotation. So if we can put a cover crop in there, something that those pests and diseases aren't really feeding upon, it's going to help break those cycles. And breaking those cycles is one of the most important things you can do to manage pests and diseases. So putting a cover crop there, not giving them something to feed and continually reproduce upon, is going to be a big win. And the third big reason for why we like to cover crop is to build our soils, to add organic matter to our soils. Down here, we add a lot of compost, but you know, with the heat, that organic matter burns up pretty quickly. So we always have to be constantly thinking about adding more organic matter to our soils to make our soils more workable and healthy. So these soils here in this area that we call the dream garden, which we've only been gardening in for probably just, you know, around a year and a half now, were absolutely just terrible when we started. Just terrible. Couldn't work them. They were crushed over bad. Wasn't any organic matter there because this was just some pine trees. It was just bad. But since then, you know, we've been growing in there, which always helps. You know, growing anything, those roots will break down the soil. We've been adding a healthy amount of compost and cover cropping, and our soils are a lot better than we started here. When we first started in these plots, if you tilled them up, it was still kind of just chunky and nasty. And now we've got much better soils because we've got a lot of organic matter in there, compost, plant debris, all that good stuff. Now there are lots of good options as far as warm season cover crops go. You could do sunflowers like we did on that previous video. You've got sorghum Sudan grass, which is great, brown top millet or any kind of millet. Sun hemp is another good one. Buckwheat is a good fast one if you just got a short window. And iron clay peas, which we're going to be planting today. Now we haven't always followed this rule, but in the last couple of years we have tried to the best of our ability. So there's been some studies out there that say you want to follow a monocot vegetable crop with a dicot cover crop, or follow a dicot vegetable crop with a monocot cover crop. Because monocots and dicots each have their own plant mycorrhiza, different species of mycorrhiza and stuff. And so it gives you a greater diversity of soil life there when you rotate monocots and dicots. You don't have to do this. Cover crops are going to be beneficial either way, but we do try to do this if we can. So we had corn here, which is a monocot, and we're going to follow it with a dicot, which is the iron clay peas. We could also do buckwheat, which is a dicot. We could also do sun hemp, which is a dicot. With our other plots where we've got dicots already planted, like for instance a plot with squash or our tomato plot or something like that, we're going to follow that with a monocot cover crop, something like sorghum Sudan grass or either brown top millet. So we try to keep that monocot dicot rotation in place. Doesn't always work out perfectly, but it's just something, you know, little goal kind of to aim towards. So as I told you, today we're going to be putting in some of these iron clay peas here. And this is a legume. Obviously this is a nitrogen fixing cover crop. It's also going to give us a lot of dense foliage so we can shade out that area, keep any weeds from thriving there. So this is what they look like here. Little small peas there, just like a field pea as we call it here in the south. And I could plant these with my garden seeder if I wanted to be real precise with it. It would take a little longer to do it that way, but I could do it that way. And if I was just working with a real narrow spot where I wanted to be, you know, I didn't want to just strow seed everywhere, I would probably do that. In this case, I'm just going to cover crop this entire plot here, so I'm just going to hand scatter it and rake it in. But if you want to be real precise with it, that garden seeder is a good way to go for these peas. Now the seeding rate on these, we can see here, is 2.5 pounds per 1,000 square feet. This plot here is 1,000 square feet. Now when it comes to cover cropping, I always kind of go by the rule of thumb to kind of double that seed density recommendation. I just like to plant my stuff thick, and so if I use a whole 5-pound bag here, you know, I'm not going to be super specific with it. I've got enough seed here to cover this plot. I'm just going to walk out there, just start throwing seed, get some good coverage there. And if I use 3 pounds, that'll be okay. If I use 5 pounds, that'll be okay. If I use 7 pounds, that'll be okay. I'm just gonna make sure I get this plot nice and covered. So I ended up using a little over 5 pounds, probably closer to 6 pounds there to get some nice coverage out there. Now, one thing to note with any kind of field pea, whether it be like a purple hull or pink eye or crowder pea that you're growing for food, or a pea that you're growing for a cover crop, peas are notorious for having lower germination than most crops. You know, average on peas is going to be 80% germination. So I kind of factor that into play there, and that's why I planted it a little thicker than normal, because I know my germ's going to be around 80%. That's just peas. That's just what it is, you know. It's nothing unusual to have 75, anywhere from 75 to 85% germination on peas. You're just not going to get into the 90s with field peas. Another thing with these kind of peas is they don't really store well from one year to the next. The germination rate will drop off pretty significantly from the first year to the second year. So just purchase what you need. Don't try to you know, have a lot of it and then store it. It'll store okay in the fridge, but you will see a little drop off in germination there. So when it comes to peas, I always tell people, just get what you're going to use, and then next year you can get some of the fresh crop. That way you always have a pretty decent germination rate when you're planting. Now, if we would have planted these with our garden seeder or a seed drill behind a tractor or any kind of mechanical seeder, we'd be done by now. But since we, you know, strode them by hand, scattered them out there, we do need to rake them in a little bit to make sure we cover some of those seeds, get some good seed to soil contact for germination. Now, every time I do this on a video, we have a lot of people comment, there's so many easier ways to do that than walking around with a rake. And man, sometimes I just like to do things kind of just a slow and simple way. So I like to take my landscape rake here and I like to rake them in. And a lot of this has to do with some of my previous work experience. So when I was in undergrad in college, I worked at a golf course and on the maintenance crew, and we did everything from weed eating ditches to cutting grass to raking bunkers. And this kind of takes me back to those days when I was raking bunkers, raking sand on the golf course, and it just has a little bit of nostalgia for me. I enjoy it. I like doing it this way, and there are easier ways to do it, but this is how I like to do it. All right. Got it raked smooth there. Still some plant debris out there from that corn, but that ain't gonna hurt anything. And we'll take our tripod sprinkler, put it on here for about an hour or so a day, for assuming no rain. Water it for an hour or so, you know, a day for the next 3 or 4 days till this stuff gets up and going. And these peas are pretty heat tolerant and drought tolerant, so we don't have to water them a lot, but we do want to water them good initially so we get a good stand. So we got 1.5 plots cover crop so far this year. I say half because I'm not done with that sunflower plot there. I'm about halfway there. I still got some other plans for it, but we got one here, half there, still a few more to go. Where our tomatoes are, we've been pulling those up. Once we get the rest of those up, we'll cover crop that area. Where we've got our South Anna butternut squash planted, once we pick those, we'll cover crop that area. So we'll have at least, I'd say, close to 4 plots out of the 10 that have a warm season cover crop on them, if not more. Certain things, you know, we won't be cover cropping. Our okra is going to be here all through the summer. Peppers will be here all through the summer. Same thing with sweet potatoes. But all the other stuff that's going to kind of succumb to the heat pretty quick, we're going to get that stuff out of there and get some cover crops in there to hold that soil until fall. So if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed with your garden right now and you just, you know, you've harvested enough and ate enough from it, clean it up, get a cover crop there. Don't let it grow up with weeds, because that's just going to cause you a lot more troubles from years to come. So get a cover crop there, take a break, and let that soil kind of rehabilitate until it's time to plant some fall crops. I'll put some links below to our warm season cover crop seeds. We even got a nifty little chart there on our website that tells you the benefits of each, so you can pick which one is best for your growing or your soil situation. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give me a big thumbs up. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and hit that bell button so you get notified every time we come out with a new video. And if you did enjoy this one, check out these other 2 videos right here where we're talking about warm season cover crops. I think you'll really enjoy those as well. We'll see you next time.